Got it. Okay, so let me pull up some slides. And well, first of all, thank you for inviting me, Elena, and this community that I was not aware of, and now I am aware of. And it's great to see actually two of my colleagues, Monique and Kai, that are going to be with you in the next session. So thank you for joining. And the idea today is that we can storytell our journey of a way of going through evolutional, like this evolutionary change that organizations are living. I think something that was very resonant to me when I saw the video or the recording of David Snowden was this concept of transformation, of going from A to B, is not anymore valid in our times. We are in constant evolution as we go. And the way that we've discovered that has been for us successful, we want to share it with you. And when I say it's successful is because not only we have got to the best results in history for this region in the last year, but also there was this transformation management review where they took globally all Roche and they took a sample of 16 affiliates. And what they wanted to see was different aspects of the different affiliates. And they wanted to measure leadership, mindset, and behaviors, and how much of us, or how many of us, have gone through a learning organization path. And this region came out as the role models and leading the way on those aspects. So that's why we're so interested in sharing it, because maybe something or a nugget of knowledge that we share with you today, you're able to take to your context in your organizations, okay? As Elena said, Fernando is here because Fernando is a country ecosystem leader for Dominican Republic, and he will share with you the how. How is he living it as a leader, but also how his team is living it. And then I have Rudy next to me, Rudy Estrella, which actually, if you translate Estrella to English, it's Rudy Star. Rudy Star, which is next to me. He's a partner in what we call people analytics, because you'll see that what we're doing, data analytics, is very important for us as well. It's a big pillar in what we're doing. So let me start by sharing the presentation here. And please let me know if you can see it once I share it. Let me go here.
Yep.
Okay, can everybody see that? Let me just get you here.
Yes.
Here. Great. Okay, I just want to be able to see your faces as well as I go. So as I said initially, that's where the title comes from transformation to a systemic development approach. And hopefully by the time I get to the what, you'll understand the name systemic development. So before going into the what, obviously when we go into this evolution, there's a reason why, or a main purpose that drives an evolution in any organization. Ours was this purpose, ensuring that our innovation is available to patients as quickly as possible. And what happened in our region, and for this, I'll need you to almost get yourself in the shoes of the people that lived through this evolution. What happened before this, let's say, shift in our region is that the strategy was created and led by the hub of Central America. So you had all the enabling functions, and then you had the different countries. So all of that you see in the map is our region, and there's Jamaica, Christina, as well. So all of that is part of the Central American Caribbean region. And what happened before this was that, as you can imagine, the strategy led and created by a central hub, Costa Rica. What are the type of problems or challenges you can encounter when who implements are the countries? Can you guess what type of challenges you go through when that happens? Can you just maybe chat, or in the chat, what type of challenges can you imagine that happens when you're centrally led and the strategy has been created from there? It's an open question, just to see.
All of says misalignment. Volker says different demographics.
Different demographics.
Also says the confusion, of course. Eric Gordon says multicultural.
Multicultural.
Yes, that's nice.
Excellent.
Volker also says different healthcare systems, disagreement.
There's a disconnect.
This will not work here. Correct?
Yes.
Disconnect. Correct.
So all of that and more happens, which is why we needed to change how we did things. And this change resulted in this change. So now, today, our countries are the ones that are empowered to create the strategy because they know better the patients, they know better their context, and they are supported by the enabling functions within Costa Rica. So there are full teams, and Fernando's going to talk a little bit more of how is that constellation looking like. Today, there are full teams that are actually doing it at the country level. So that's the big shift. So if you think of yourself in that situation, what mindset shift has to happen if before I used to be the one implementing and now I'm the one strategizing? Or what mindset shift has to happen if I used to be the strategy person and now I am supporting, enabling that to be effective? Can you imagine the shift and what the internal change has to happen for you to actually lead and be in a different way? So knowing that, we knew that there had to be a focus in an individual dimension and in a team and network dimension. So we needed to support and focus on the individual growth, but also in this systemic growth. And I'm going to be using a lot of the ORS term here. So Volker, for you that you're part of the ORS world, systems as a group of interdependent people with a common purpose. That's the definition. And what we did is we bet it for two things. One, the development of skills to live the 6 mindsets that we thought those are the mindsets that if we are able to live these mindsets and are able to learn the skills that are mapped within those mindsets, that will help us to get closer to our purpose. And the other piece is a very ORS piece. And for this, I recommend highly the new book that came out of Systems Inspired Leadership. That is, how can you collectively at an organizational level start developing a systemic muscle? So we can all start being more conscious in relationship. Because if you're able to really work on that systemic muscle, then the way you are in relationship, not only with your team, but in different teams or in different networks. So with this mission, what did we do? If you're wondering what mindsets I was referring to, the 6 mindsets, those are the 6 mindsets. And those skills that you see there are skills that have been also evolutionary, that started with only probably 8 skills and now have developed into 15, because as we go, we've learned about gaps and opportunities, and we know this is important. So for example, decision making is right now a skill that we're working and tailoring it to our context. Prioritization, we're putting some emphasis there. Responsibility, what is responsibility versus accountability? How do you act from responsibility, and so on? So those are the mindsets and the skills mapped within those mindsets. And active listening and psychological safety is kind of the foundation. That's why, although it's mapped within the mindsets, it is an important foundation for us. So those are normally the 2 skills that we start with when working with the different groups. Now, the how, and this is part of the probably the what more than the how, is these skills are given through a 3-hour module. So let's say we have active listening, so we have the module of active listening. And what we're doing here is basically really trying to get the collective intelligence to understand where you are in the skill and what is it for you individually that you have to overcome, but also collectively what you have to overcome. So 70% of these modules are conversational, or practical. And just very little will be a skill, and the rest is practice, debrief, and collective intelligence. And for that, I am so grateful for the tools and all the learnings of ORS, because basically the facilitation is done through revealing the system to itself, including all the deep democracy, which is including all the voices, helping them to sense, hear, and listen what is going on, and so on. So we have the areas of the skills, and then we have the systemic part, and this is the more organizational. And I know this slide maybe has too much on it, but I'm going to try to do my best to explain it. So if we take 3 steps back and look at the meta level of the organization, as I said, our organization is a whole region, and we have ecosystems, and we have enabling functions. And all the functions, all the enabling functions, and all the ecosystems, all of them go through what we call EVOKE modules. On every 6 weeks, they get a different skill. And within that different skill, they have practices in between, they get to integrate it. And in total, we are 250 people. From those 250 people, 19 groups are facilitated every 6 weeks on the different skills. Now, there's not a curriculum like everybody's going now through this one, and everybody's going now through this one, and now through this one. But actually, we're listening to their needs and applying as we go. Okay, so that's why it's very dynamic. So I'm referring to the column in the center right now. That's why it's very dynamic. And at the same time, that gives us the overview of the whole organization, of what is really happening. What are the systemic patterns that we're starting to identify? So 5 of us that are ORS coaches are part of this facilitation of EVOKE modules. And what we do is we gather every month or every 2 months, and we start discussing what are the systemic patterns that we're starting to understand, what are the gaps, and what are the opportunities. So that's one piece. The other piece that I'm going to refer is to the people analytic piece, is we get also, every person at Roche gets an individual one-to-one coaching for their own individual growth. And it's a pool of 12 coaches that are also, sorry, it was the light. So it's a pool of 12 coaches that have, I don't know why the light is doing that.
And this program too.
So you have to move, Rudy. You'll have to start moving so it doesn't. Right. It looks like a disco. Sorry, people. So these 12 coaches have these 250 people in an individual basis for 5 sessions. And we also hear from them. What are they noticing? What are they learning? So that's the qualitative data. And then we have the EVOKE coaches, which I already mentioned, which are the ones facilitating the modules. That's also qualitative data. And then we have the feedback data. And the feedback data is that everybody at our organization, they get to decide what do they really want to work on? What is that one thing that will help them get closer to the mindset they want to develop? So they decide what they want to work on, the behavior, what do they want to start doing and stop doing? And they get 2 people from their team and 1 from the network to feed back to them on a monthly basis. So every month they get feedback, and we capture all that in a database, and we can see the trends and the patterns. And Rudy is going to speak a little bit more about that soon. And the final piece is the governance. And the governance is all about, we're distributed in committees, and we also have the leadership team, what we call the enabling team. And then there's the area where I head, that it is by implementing all this. So in the case of the enabling team, for us, it's very important that they not only are aware of the systemic patterns that is going across, but also that they walk the talk. That everything we work on the EVOKE modules with the organizations, they're the first one testing them. They're the first one living them. They're going to bring the message to the organization. They're going to make the links and the connections. So that's a crucial piece in the governance. And then committee 2, which is a group of us that meet on a regular basis, is more to put the architecture of what is needed for prioritization to be successful? What is needed for courageous authenticity to be more amplified, and so on? So all these pieces are basically what makes this approach systemic, because we're including everybody in the company, number one, and all the layers. So we're all going through this, and all the layers are there, and we're constantly feeding the system. So it's very dynamic and it's moving as we go. And we're learning as we go as well. Now, today I can really tell the story looking at it backwards, but on the moment, it was creation as we went, experimenting as we went. And we didn't know where we were going at that point. We knew the vision, we knew the strategy, we knew where we're betting at. So the individual dimension, the systemic dimension, but we had to co-create as we went that path. I don't know if that is making sense. If not, you can just ask questions as we go. Now, the most beautiful part of this journey, and at least that gives this satisfaction where you see things growing by themselves. And that's where people started to raise their hand and say, I'm very interested in learning. I want to be part of this. I want to do something. So today we have an agile community of 30 people that are self-organized, that what we enable to them, and that's where the architectural piece comes in, we enable for them the skills. So we had 2 Agile and ORS coaches come in, and for 3 months gave them a real experience where they were going to learn by doing. So they were going to do the work, and it was going to be 1 person per team all across Roche. So that meant that we had people from the ecosystems, from the enabling functions, from everywhere. And they learned by doing for 3 months. So it was a big time commitment. However, we are seeing the impact now, and this is where Fernando has been a great partner, because we've basically led this and helped them and sponsored them to make it a reality. And this community today is self-organized, facilitating. So they facilitate the many different requests. They mentor, and now they're also given the EVOKE module, being agile and doing agile. The next community that also basically raised their hand and said, we want to be part of that, was when we did the leadership circle profile as a whole, as an organization. The lowest creative competency was courageous authenticity. So when we saw that it was a clear need, we invested in giving the skill of Dare to Lead, Brené Brown, and trained them in that skill. So we have 18 people, again, across the organization, across the ecosystems, the enabling functions, and they are now in this moment deciding what experiments, what outcomes make sense within this organization to provide this knowledge back and help others with that knowledge. And then we have the EVOKE champions, which have been people that are interested in facilitating the different modules, or they want to learn more, or they want to co-create a module because they see the necessity. So those are the communities. And then we obviously have our enabling team that is very important, because as I said, for the role modeling. And then the piece in the center is everything that we work as a team in the systemic development area, where we have not only the modules, but individual coaching, team coaching. We have intact teams to observe the teams and see if they're really living the behaviors, and people analytics, which is an important pillar. So how are we doing up to now? Is it making sense? Yeah, okay. Now, in this type of evolutionary approach or systemic development approach, measuring looks very different. We do have lagging indicators and leading indicators. So as, for example, one of our lagging indicators is leadership circle profile as a collective. And we want to see in 2 years how that's going to look like. What is our evolution going to look like? And then we have leading indicators through the different feedback from the intact teams and so on. But I guess one of the indicators that we kind of learned as we went and we saw it changing was these emergent needs, gaps, or opportunities that we started to identify. And those are the patterns that you see once, twice around the teams and say, okay, there's a need here. How do we work together on creating an architecture around it or providing something, or will the team itself or just reveal it to the team so they can work on it? And this is the piece where we say, we started in an organization a year ago that didn't know about psychological safety. So that's a clear example, that did not know what was psychological safety. Today, they know what it is. They've been also part of the skill building of how to create it and what does it mean for them and in this context. And the last piece is next year, we're hoping not only that we're living it in the teams, but the conversation has advanced. So I guess progress here looks as what will our conversations on these different mindset topics change and how that will also have an evolution, if that makes sense. And then in this piece, I'm gonna hand over to Rudy. Rudy, you want to talk through here or there? Okay. Because he's going to give you clear examples of how this looks like from the people analytics piece. And I'm going to figure out how to turn on light.
No worries. Well, thank you very much, Gaby. And hi, everyone. Nice.
Oh, you just went on mute. So.
I think you're there listening through here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we don't see Rudy.
And they don't see you, Rudy?
Si quieres apagar el micrófono, yo lo enciendo aquí.
Here?
Perfect. That works.
Oh, all right. I have to.
It's okay.
You're visible. Your video is on.
I know how to do it. Wait.
There you go.
There you go. Now I'm in a spotlight, right? Now.
Yes, you're now on your computer.
Great, thank you. It was because I was using Gaby's microphone. So nice to meet you all. This is me. So we have some light problems, but we are checking out. So as Gaby was mentioned, people analytics is like one of the pillars to measure and to see progress from a quantitative point of view, right? Of course, as every process, as in every project, we have to understand the context. With that, I mean, we cannot just put data in some Excel, Google Sheet, or a Tableau or Power BI without context. So these numbers are based on all the theory that Gaby was mentioning. So that's a very important context. Thank you. So some of these numbers or some of these of the insights are the following. In the pie at the left side of the slide, we can find that blue piece, right? That blue piece means that the 63% of the entire system is committed themselves with the growth mindset and challenger thinking mindset. That translates into courageous authenticity, right? Courageous authenticity, the concept of LCP, leadership circle profile. So that is a very important insight, or an insight to work on, right? So based on that, based on the commitments or the behaviors that we are committed, in this case for growth mindset and the other ones, we receive feedback from other peers. That are 2 peers from the direct team, I don't know, business operations, two people, and 1 from the network. I don't know, if I am from data analytics, I receive feedback from Gaby, that Gaby is systemic development, right? Because I am network of hers and she is my network. And that gives us data from a scale from 1 to 5. There are the scales that you can find in the upper at the right, the trend that we see at the right, at the upper right. And that trend means that 6 months ago, we were in an average as a system of 2.4. That 2.4 in a scale from 1 to 5 means that our behaviors were occasionally evident, right? Not all the time, occasionally evident. 2 of 5, right? That's the scale. And then we have evolved until today. Well, if we put the last date in March, we are now in the stage or the bucket of 3.4. That 3.4 means that our behaviors are frequently evident. It's like an entire stair, right? It's an entire step of our behaviors, our visibility, right? I don't know if that makes sense. I'm trying to be very paused in order to present the data. So please feel free to ask. It says, Rob Oliver, it seems that these mindsets are mutually exclusive. That's an interesting question, Rob, and it's a data science question. Maybe I can talk a little bit later of this in order to respond that. It's very interesting. I love your question. Thank you, Rob. I'll be right back in that question. So the trend chart, we were in 2.4. That means that our behaviors were occasionally evident, and we are now in the frequent, our behaviors are frequently evident. And then we have this slide of the bars. That is the last date of this graph is in March 2022. And is the distribution of the system based on where are they in this scale. So we have that 55% of the system that their behaviors are as minimum usually evident. We have a structural base, right? Well, the structural base means the entire system, and 55% more of the half are already in usually evident or always evident their behaviors, in this case for the entire mindset, but mainly for the growth mindset. I don't know if that makes sense. I'll be back in there.
Rudy, is this self-reported? Is this taken out of the leadership profile? How do you get to the 1 through 5?
Actually, we set up this scale based on the principle of the visibility of, for example, the LCP, but we have defined this scale from 1 to 5 in order to make it simpler and to process the data for us.
But it's based, but I think what the question is, it's based on the feedback of your peers.
Yeah.
Okay, so
that's a good point. Thank you. So an important question I have received during these months is, okay, how can we measure impact on business, right? With these programs. So this is a chart, a very simple chart, is a way, right? Not the way, is a way to measure impact in business. And we put together the two trends. Two trends. There are sales, right? And the blue line, that is the scale or the trend that we saw before. And we compare those trends. And those trends is telling us that the skills integration of the visibility of the behaviors are correlated with the sales in a 35.85%, almost 36%. So that means that while the skills integration or the visibility of the behaviors is more evident, the sales can increase with a relation of of almost 36% cut to March, right? So if you look at this as the traditional statistical view, maybe a 36% is not much, but from the data science view, it's very important. So this can justify your efforts to develop your own programs, right? In other words, work on skills can increase outcomes, can increase sales, can increase outputs. Yeah, that's kind of the message, right? And it's kind of the message also that it's possible to to measure this progress, right? And impact. Let's see.
Do you also look at things like turnover or, you know, employee satisfaction?
Yes. Yeah.
Maybe Gaby can amplify us that because we have other sources of data.
Yeah. So, can you hear me well?
Let me just mute.
Yeah.
Now?
Yeah.
Okay. So for those that maybe have worked at Roche or have consulted at Roche, you probably know that we have something called GEOS, and that's basically is measured every 2 years, and where we see the engagement, where we see our balance, how are we doing, and all these different. So definitely one of the efforts that we have started this year is to start collecting leading indicators and not have to wait until that second year. But that effort has started this year, and yes, it has to do also with the turnaround and the engagement. Okay, so now I'm gonna hand over to Fernando. As I said, Fernando is the country ecosystem lead for Dominican Republic.
Well, thank you, Gaby, and nice to meet you all. And thank you for this great opportunity to share with you a little bit, you know, from all this theory that Gaby just presented to, you know, to implementation, to real life. And so I will share a little bit some of the learnings, at least in the Dominican Republic ecosystem. But before I share that, just to, you know, some few details of Dominican Republic, as you probably know, you know, it's in the Caribbean. It's an island of 11 million people with a very complex healthcare system. And also a beautiful place to visit for your vacations. I've been living here a little bit over 6 months, and I'm really looking forward to try to get to know as much as possible of this beautiful country. Now, in the right-hand side of the slide, what you can see there, it's our structure, our ecosystem, our Roche ecosystem in Dominican Republic. So for these 11 million people, what we have is 15 people. But in this evolution that Gaby mentioned before, it was just a commercial team. And let me give you just 2 messages here. The first one is that we moved from a commercial team to now an ecosystem with different roles. And I'm not going to go into detail of each one of them, but as you can probably see, there's some related to access and to public, to NGOs, to public policy. And so that the beauty of this is to really leverage on the different expertise of each one of the members to really look for better solutions for our patients, which is our purpose as a company. And the second message is that in this ecosystem, there's no hierarchy. So for example, as Gaby mentioned, I'm leading the ecosystem. However, not all of them report to me directly. Some report to San Jose. And this is great because then we get the local perspective, but also the regional point of view to really build and look for better solutions for patients. So with this now, we can go to the following slide. Gaby, please. And we started this great experience last year. And what are some of the learnings? Well, first of all, the speed of adoption. I mean, it's a small team, as I mentioned, 15 people, but still, not everyone will adopt at the same speed the concepts of the mindset as well as the skills. And so what did we do? What we did locally was to delegate or designate 2 champions of our own team to really review the models, so that trying to make sure that we're living it, that we're practicing it, that we're understanding, and it has worked well. Also, something else related to the speed of adoption is that when these models were implemented, they were every 4 weeks. And what we learned is that there was not enough time for everyone to really understand, to really put in practice, and therefore now it's every 6 weeks. So that gives us a little bit more time to process and to really put in practice what we're learning. Second learning is breaking old patterns. The model, we had a lot of active participation with Gaby. However, what happens the next day or the next week? It's really easy to go back to the old pattern, because it takes effort. It takes energy to really change and to really adopt. And so what we did was to design team alliances and say, okay, what can we really commit to implement in our team to make it happen? And so that's what we did. It's not perfect, but at least it helped us to really put in practice what we're learning. And also would like to share that as a leader, I have to be a role model. However, at the same time, I have to share, or I have to show vulnerability, because I'm learning too. And since I'm still learning, I will definitely make mistakes, and I will have to learn from that. But I have to share that with my team so that they know that we are all in the same process. Yeah, we can move to thank you, Gaby. The third learning is common understanding and language. And what I mean by this is are we really in the same page? Are we really understanding the mindset, the skills, same, for the 15 members? And so what we're doing is to have speakers from our own team in our monthly retrospective meeting. And that helps us to, not only have the champions, but also to have this responsibility among the different members to share in this monthly meeting some of the models that we learn with Gaby, and of course the mindset and skills. Finally, something that we have to be prepared. And it happened to us recently in Dominican Republic, which is, once the team is practicing psychological safety, you start going deeper and deeper. And what happens is it's really, it will bring to the surface some issues, some comments that I call bumps in the road, because it might hurt a little bit. It might be uncomfortable. You have to be prepared to face it, because what this means is that really we're moving forward. We're evolving as a team. But it's something that happens, and it's probably not this exponential growth that you will expect. But definitely it's a good sign. And finally, I would like just to share that as a leader of the Dominican Republic ecosystem, and as a student also in this journey, some of the preconditions to share with you is, the responsibility. As I mentioned, to be this role model, and to really help and to facilitate with the team to make it possible, to make it happen. To help them really understand and to ask for help if we needed to, you know, move forward as a team, as we actually did today with Gaby in one session. But also the second one is, it seems easy, but not so easy to do, which is, you know, to trust that the answers are in the team. And that takes time, that takes sometimes, you know, effort in terms that you might have the answer, or you would like to hire a third party, or, you know, a coach. However, everything is there, but you just need to facilitate. You just need to work with your team to really look for those answers, but to trust that they are there. And finally, least but not, I mean, really important is that you will find some conflicts and you will have to face that. But again, it's a really good sign that something wants to change. And that happened to us recently, where I would never expect some of the comments that we received, but that we need to celebrate this. We need to really, and what I mean by celebrate this, because that's what we're expecting from each one of the members, but we have to be prepared to face it, so that this will help us move in the right path, and not that it will probably hold everyone to express what they're feeling. So these are some of the learnings, and with this, I will go back to Gaby. So please, Gaby.
Thank you. Just to wrap up, this is our last message, I guess, for all of you. If we look back after a year and 3 months of this journey, I would say the reasons why this has become successful, or we've got the results we've got, or that we are now role modeling as the transformation review revealed in December last year. It's because our general manager, which is Alvaro Soto, he made it a priority. This is a priority for him. And because he made it a priority, this is working. So you have to make it a priority, number one. Number two, it has to be all together. Only working with certain parts. How many times have you been in organizations or transformations where you're only transforming the leadership team? And what about the rest? And what about everybody else? Because if we're all expected to be leaders, we all should be giving the opportunity, the equal opportunity to have the skills, have the how, and go together in this direction. Then there's a necessary visionary leadership here, to be able to see and learn to architect and take away the roadblocks and work through and so on. And the last piece that I think is fundamental, and this is where sometimes there's approaches in the past that I've seen where we're trying to apply everything to every context. The more context-driven, the more integral to the context you make something, the more meaningful it will be to the people that are in that journey. If they're able to understand from their context, what does this mean? What are the challenges that I have? What do I need to grow in myself or change? What are the habits I need to put in place? And make it to their context, the more integration there is of this change. So with that, we're finished, and I don't know if we should open for questions or we can go to breakouts. How would you want to do this?
Let's just check if there are any questions before we start with the breakouts, just for context.
I had one question. So I just wanted to get clarification. So you mentioned that the strategy, the focus is on becoming decentralized, correct? And I think you mentioned that there were 30, was it 30 coaches or 30 persons who were in the kind of new ecosystem or the grouping that you brought up? Was it 30 people that you mentioned?
in the Agile community, we have 30 volunteers that are part of the system. So basically they have a role in their day-to-day, and they dedicate a percentage to Agile coaching or Scrum Master.
Okay, so for those 30 people, are they the ones who you're using kind of the analytics or getting the analytics on? And are they
So our analytics, which is Rudy Starr that you just met, he's actually dedicated to work in this program, which we call EVOKE. So he's actually a statistician by profession, and is working together with. There's a whole group here of data analytics, but he's working in people analytics, which is what we're trying to discover together.
Okay, now I get the part that Rudy's doing the analytics, but the question was in terms of the data and what you're reporting on. Is that based on, I guess, you know, self-reporting, which Volker mentioned? Is it that the 30 people are self-reporting and kind of identifying the mindset that exists to kind of feed into that analytics?
Wait, just a second. You're talking about, Christina, about how to capture data, or what data are we capturing, and who is capturing it? Okay.
Yeah, what data you're capturing
so
to get.
Each of us, each person, have selected 3 peers from, well, 2 from our direct team of working, right? And 1 from our network. And they have a form, for example, they have a form of media, a form with my behavior that I've selected, committed to, and they select a visibility in that scale from 1 to 5. So those 3 people, in a monthly basis, access to a G-form link in our case, and they give me feedback in that way. I don't know, for example, Gaby is one of my peers, and she put a number from 1 to 5, and my boss is other peer, and he gives me a data from 1 to 5, and another colleague of mine that from the digital team is giving me feedback too. So I take that data from the entire people, the entire form, the entire Google Sheet, the entire data sets, and build those kind of statistics and graphics that you were seeing. I don't know if that answers your question. Is that clear?
Yeah, no, it's very clear. I just wanted to kind of make...
I'm sorry, we're losing lights.
Give me a minute, I'll be right back.
No, I was saying that it's very clear. I just wanted to get clarity.
This is like whatever we get. No, but just to add to the question that you just made, Reese, this important question. We also did a leadership circle profile. Everybody did the leadership circle profile in 2021, and we're going to redo it on 2024 after 2 years. So that was for us a baseline. So that's a collective baseline that we're using. We're using also the feedback, and we're going to be using the GEOS report, which I just mentioned, that is our engagement and more specific to different areas.
Okay, and then just one last quick question, because being in Jamaica, I just wanted to get clarity. So I know that you said that you have 30 people who are like in the Agile community overall. And just in terms of getting to that point of building the psychological safety, is it the case that if, let's say, I'm going to say with Jamaica, if they become decentralized, is it that they're then kind of reporting into the hub, which is Costa Rica, where they have a specific Agile coach assigned to, let's say, the Jamaica team? Like, it wasn't really quite clear in that respect.
So, and thank you. So basically every ecosystem, so in the case of Jamaica, they belong to Caribbean Cluster 1. Why? Because we have Jamaica, Barbados, Curaçao, they're together. And they have one Agile coach there. Trinidad and Tobago has another Agile coach. Guatemala has another Agile coach. Panama has another Agile coach. But there are people with roles that dedicate a percentage of their time as Agile coaches.
Okay, got it. So therefore the Agile coach sits within the country specifically. There is not like an external Agile coach.
No. So there's always somebody within the country or the system that is an Agile coach. However, what they do is they also share with each other. So for example, somebody from Trinidad, although they sit in Trinidad, they don't want to be always the one doing Agile facilitation. So they have their own chat in their own system. They're like, can I have 2 people to facilitate this brainstorming session? And then 2 of their peers would say, oh, I have time, or I have time. And then they go and help them. So they also cross-pollinate their own knowledge and learnings and facilitation.
Okay, all right, cool. Thanks for that, because that was always my question, because I'm very used to kind of like in a Caribbean context, even though you kind of say it's becoming decentralized, it's not really. It's usually somebody living somewhere else, like say in the States, and they're acting as a coach when they don't understand the Caribbean context. So that's good to know.
Which is very important what you're saying, that exactly that's the point. They understand their context better than anybody. They know their culture better than anybody.
Yeah.
Thank you, Christina, for the question.
That's one of my curiosities was sort of about regional differences or cultural differences, because, you know, it's easy enough from here, Bay Area, to think, oh, that's South America. That's sort of one thing, and it's far from it. So I'm sort of curious if you have some observations about what's sort of regional or cultural.
I would love Fernando to chip in here, because he's a Costa Rican that now moved to Dominican Republic and has had this cultural emergence that is very different within the same region. Fair?
Okay, I'll do my best. But Volker, he's totally right. Usually it's this stereotype that it's all Central or South America, you know, and it's culture is completely different. What we call the North countries of Central America, like Guatemala, like El Salvador. I mean, they are more alike, but they're totally different than like Costa Rica and Nicaragua. And then you have the Caribbean, Cuba and Dominican Republic. Well, Christina, you know, from Jamaica. I mean, and it's a totally different culture. And sometimes and sharing with you about the speed of adoption, we already know. I mean, if you send an email requesting something, you know who's going to be answered, you know, first and who's going to be last. And it's just, you know, it's just the way it is. It's just part of the culture. So as many of you mentioned, when there's this disconnection, misalignment, definitely it's really hard from just one country, even when you visit the different countries, to really understand and to really align the strategy so that it makes sense to each one of the countries, and to really understand what the patient needs are in each one of the ecosystems, as well as the healthcare accounts. So yes, there are quite a few differences, and it's a challenge. At the same time, it's a great opportunity because you get to, you know, visit so many places, meet so many people, and also kind of opens your horizon, and you start losing this kind of stereotypes. And so that is also something that I really love when I've been in some of the regional roles. Hope this answers your question.
And Fernando, there's a really good question that says, what is an example of innovation that was made available to patients as a result of this effort? And what patient-focused metrics show improvements in this process that indicates that it's a success?
Okay. So when I was mentioning about stereotypes, and you would say, you know, like I've been in the Genentech campus, I mean, it's amazing, you know, and also work in some of the or work with some of the global colleagues, and you might think that all the large countries such as Germany and France and US will be able to to do a lot more, and probably part of that is true. But to answer the question, just going to give you one example from end of last year. There's one project called ID2P, which is in easy, simple words, is to, instead of the patient coming to the hospital, what we want is to go to his house and take the medicine, for him or for her. Because some of these patients have a really hard time to try to get to the hospital just to get the medicine. And in Dominican Republic, we were the first country to implement it in oncology in the world. And we were the second in Latam because Chile was first, but in non-oncology. So this is just to give you an example of how this new mindset of the ecosystem team helps to do things different than before. And so this is just to give you an example of what we're trying to do for patients. There might be some other examples in terms of how are we trying to innovate and take this innovation and to patients, but I would stay with this one that I just shared in the sake of time. But definitely that this new mindset is helping us to do things different.
And when it comes, I'm just going to add that when it comes to what indicates success, I'm going to repeat what I said at the beginning. When we say our purpose is to bring innovation as soon as possible to patients, the more innovation means for us that the medication is there for patients, that they're able to receive what they need. In this year, in the year that we just closed, we've never had the numbers that we've had in this region that happened this year. And we're actually closing Q1 with very similar results. So who else had their hand up? I saw that.
I think there was a question from Rob.
Yeah, let's answer Rob's question first and you can get back to me.
Rudy?
Yeah. Well, can you minute?
Rob, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
I don't know if Rob can amplify his question, but I will say the next thing. Okay, those 6 mindsets are very, very correlated, and that is evident in our internal data and from the data of the LCP group, right? So, and I will be commenting a bit more. Maybe if Rob, please, can help me. Go ahead. So those 6 mindsets are very correlated, but when we took the commitment with that behavior, we have very specific things or behaviors, right? For example, in my personal case, I choose balance, right? That balance is in growth mindset, but is kind of, well, not distance, but is not exactly courageous authenticity. But I know that if I increase my balance, I can increase my courageous authenticity in the last number I saw was like a correlation of 78%. So they are very correlated, but in the moment we have to write down our commitment with that behavior, it must be very specific. I don't know, Rob, if that answers your question or give you some context.
Yeah, it sounded multidimensional, but you're saying you had the choice was you had to show a choice that was.
Rob, I don't know if you're talking. You're muted.
I am. I'm unmuted. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. He can't hear me.
I can't hear Rob.
We can hear you.
He can't. Anyways, it sounds like they had to make a choice, and that's why it was mutually exclusive. As represented by his pie chart.
I think I lost part of your comment, but I think you're okay, right?
Type it for Rudy. Type it in the chat box.
Right.
For Rudy.
I'll try.
Does everyone remember the 6 mindsets, or should we ask Gaby to share that slide again?
Do you want me to share it?
Rob, do we need to share? Are you clear? Are we more?
I think if you guys heard his answer, it sounds like it is multidimensional, but for the data that he's showing, it represents a choice that people made, and you had to pick one or the others. And that's why it was mutually exclusive. That's what it appears that he's saying. But he's admitting that they could be multidimensional. You could actually have multiple mindsets, which was my question. Because I would think that I personally could have multiples of those mindsets. But for his data, it sounds like people had to respond with a single choice.
That's what I understand, yeah.
Yeah.
Great, that helps. It'd be nice though to see people's ideas about their different mindsets, but I guess there's a purpose for it.
And that's actually the question that we would like to open up the breakouts with. Like, what are you noticing that is key in your context, not only in mindsets, but also what are the top skills that you're noticing that are needs in your context? Because we're learning as we're going. And this year, at least, there are 4 more that we found that are gonna really move the needle for us, at least.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Yen?
I think this is I think this question is more for you, Gaby. You know, you mentioned what I caught was you know, when you had your 3 verticals and there was this sort of like lateral integration going from dynamic to kind of structural, right? And that was in a way, it seemed like I would imagine to be some sort of organic process through it. And you were saying how that was, you know, you were figuring your way out, your way through as you were doing it. Can you speak to, I don't know how difficult, maybe this is a big can of worms, but can you speak to how the relationship that you had with you know, upper management and just the staff in general, the culture in which, as this was a co-design, I mean, you're ORSC, right? So how did you guys go about creating the feedback loops? Can you give us a sense of how the co-design, the merge and co-design occurred? You know, were there missteps? Like, how many were you constantly kind of like trying things out, failing and making adjustments, or was it pretty, you know, was it pretty clear, or was there any sense of like, how did leadership adapt to that type of way of working, right? Because that's ultimately very challenging, right? Because it's sort of like you try this way, but it doesn't quite work. And if you can kind of relate to like some instances where the culture got stuck, that's going to happen, right? No matter, everybody gets stuck at some point. And yeah, anything like that you can share about the journey in which you got there?
So let me start with the co-design. That's a big question with a lot of points.
Yeah,
so I'm going to try to
question.
do my best. Yeah. And if I forget anything, you just get me back. So let me start with the co-design. I came in with the sole purpose. So I was in global. I was 18 years in Switzerland, Basel. Okay. And I was given the opportunity to come back to the region I was born in, but that I lived not most of my life in, right? So when I decided to take this decision, it was very, very important for me. Who was I going to work with on this? Because just to give you a sense, in Central America or the Caribbean, ORSC coaches are not normal. Systemic coaches are not normal. So we have one person in Mexico, which actually works in the pool of coaches that in our organization, myself, and I know one person in Peru. That's it. So it was very important to have this alliance. And it was the GM, Alvaro Soto, that has been my partner in co-creating and designing, failing, standing up, and keep going. And because he is the GM, he has not only this visionary leadership, but he also takes in and lives it and goes with me. So I can tell you that every leadership circle profile that I traveled around last year, believe it or not, in COVID times, I was only traveling through all the countries doing these workshops, and Alvaro would come in the workshop, would participate, would be vulnerable, would sit there. So that alliance was crucial. I myself, I sit as part of the enabling team. Mm-hmm. So what does that help me to bring constantly the learnings from the organization and what I'm hearing from the coaches back to the leadership team and reflect them back, and what orgs we learn reveal the system to itself. So either correct or auto-correct. So, and my other hat is sitting and calling that out in the leadership team as well. So I work with them as a leadership team, and I'm also sitting in the different EVOKE sessions across the organization. Obviously, I can't take on the 19, but that's how it is. Now, the first bump in the road we had was that we started only working with ecosystems, with the countries. So almost the pendulum went one side. And first, it was all the focus about enabling functions in Costa Rica. Then this happens, this change happens, this evolution happens, and now all the focus is on the countries. So what happens automatically? The enabling functions feel excluded. They feel left behind, because then these people start talking and acting different, and it doesn't match, which makes us have the decision, or take the decision together with the GM. This is going to be an area. It's not going to be one person coming in for 1 year, 2 years and doing this. We're going to have an area dedicated to upcoming evolutionary skills in that development.
That's interesting.
So that's the number one bump in the road.
Yeah. Because immediately when you're saying that, it reminds me, and this is a kind of like a hypothesis I've had, which is there needs to be somebody who holds the entire system, the whole context, and it sounds like it's this GM, right? Who is basically. It's sort of like he's using you guys as just enablers to sense into systemic blindness, right? You're raising issues for him. He's basically being the presence that's needed for the entire system to work smoothly, and so on and so forth, right?
And I'll give you a clear example of what that looks like today. Our EVOKE coaches are 5. As I said, I'm part of those 5, which are ORSCers. And we're giving like every week at least 1 to 3 of these modules. And then when we meet, we start identifying these very strong patterns. And there were three teams that have something recurrent about psychological safety, but we're not sure exactly what it is. So we're doing an experiment in the next weeks where the GM, myself, and a volunteer from the enabling team are coming and having a dialogue to understand what is psychological safety, what is not, what's working, what is not working, what is the edge for this team, and unveil it. But that's how invested he is.
Right. Interesting. That's really great. Yeah.
Yeah. And what else was the question?
No. I mean that was basically it. Because kind of like there is a certain. I think a lot of times when we talk about transformations, we think of it as we come in there. There's these structural, almost near prescriptive approaches that we're going for. We have our toolbox that we go to, and there is this certain. I guess that's the I couldn't quite put my finger on the question myself, but there is this sort of evolutionary emergent thing to just even sense in, because like when we talk about systems, when we talk about relationship coaching, you're going to run into parts of the system that react. It's going to be a very organic process, and it's not this thing of like, oh, I can come up with these structures, and I have when X happens, do Y, right? This is a completely human approach that is completely organic, completely emergent, and that's really great to hear that you and what I kind of heard in your answer in a moment, like when you said it went to the countries, was it like kind of like these pockets began to take off on their own? They began to basically relax and began to discover a lot of flow. They were getting things done. And then, but there's this kind of like jealousy of lack of attention or something happening elsewhere, like with the enablers. That's basically how you're saying.
in the enabling functions, because they felt like left off. They saw how the organic started working, and they were like, we want that in our team too.
Yeah.
So how come we don't get what they're getting? But another thing that I just remembered that it goes to that answer is, I remember that our conversations last year and my peers in the enabling team, they would say, but we want to see, how are you measuring progress? How are you measuring impact? You know that systemically, that's not so easy to show.
No.
It's something complex that you want to make complicated or simple, and it's not that easy. So that's why I say that how our conversation changes and problems that are today become different tomorrow, that's progress. But then we have to start switching our progress to not something tangible so much, but something that you'll see in the behaviors and the progress of the team.
That's right. Because how can you measure the quality of a conversation, right? And say that that's some sort of metric? That's kind of strange.
Exactly. So that's why we have these leading indicators, but we have this other indicator that is more the change and evolution of the conversation.
Sure.
And the relationship at the end. So I saw a question here that I really resonated. Was, you're welcome. Did your journey have any connection to the corporate-wide investment in coaching that heard about in Coaching Rising Summit, Paul Byrne, Tammy Laurie, Bruce Line? Okay, so when we remember that global, I sat in global before, so I know what it is to be in global. Global creates something, and it's not like immediately it's here. It's not immediately in. And what was interesting to me is that when I came to this region, everything that was in my fingertips in the global environment was absolutely not known in this region. And now these connections are going to become more synergies through our people and culture people, which are HR. Now, I work very closely with our HR business partner. I'm working very closely with our people and organizational growth partner, and seeing where there are synergies, but also there's a lot of offerings that we have that are starting to help them as well. Because, for example, team coaching is something that is not yet a normal in Roche. We have one-to-one coaching, we have coactive coaching, but team coaching, we're being pioneers there. So much that now Chile wants it, and now we're going to Chile. I've worked recently with Peru, because the start of this approach starts with team coaching. So the answer to your question, Olaf, is basically, we're starting those synergies, and we're working through those synergies. But I that have been in the two worlds, the speed is different, and what you have in your surrounding is different as well. The options and the access.
All right, thank you.
Any other question?
Maybe more just an observation, sort of how fascinating to listen to this sort of, building a virtuous cycle that becomes self-reinforcing and is really sort of a large-scale leadership development effort, and how much of that we're struggling with in the context of software development, where there's so much attention on the craft of developing the software and working with the teams that are actually doing the work, and how much we're struggling to support the managers that oversee those efforts to actually start to understand what's going on the floor. So like, oh, we're agile, and then that's the last. They heard the word before, and now they're done. And how many challenges that really creates in the context of, this is a very technical community.
Yeah.
Volker, I almost feel like arguing with you about that thing about we're focusing so much on the technical pieces. I think that's partially.
I'm not sorry, and I don't mean the craft itself, but just working with the development teams.
Okay, got it. Yeah.
Yeah, whether it's technical, no, most of that are people skills. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
We know they've learned coding at university.
No, and the thing is, nobody actually focuses on actually coaching them through technical practices anymore, right? That they're just left on their own for that.
Yeah, yeah.
So I'm looking at the time and I'm thinking our speakers, they initially designed breakout groups for us so they can learn from you what is relevant to you and what is challenging in your environment, because learning is, forever going. So I just want to check with Gaby. Shall we continue with the initial plan, or shall we continue with the just Q&A and open discussion here?
What do you prefer? I'm a systems coach, so what does the system want? What does the voice of the system tells us?
I'm happy with either. I'm happy with the Q&A or the breakout. I did have one other question though, because I wanted to add in terms of what Viquez was saying. I'm very happy to have had to come to this talk because I moved back to Jamaica in November. So it's interesting to actually see that this work is going on in the Caribbean. And it makes me a little bit more hopeful, because in terms of the fact that you are actually thought about how it works regionally and the cultural context that exists. And you've actually mentioned that the EVOKE coaches have kind of realized issues with psychological safety in particular areas. Yeah, so that's kind of one of the things that I have a concern about in Jamaica in terms of culturally, the whole concept of psychological safety. I love it, it's brilliant, but being back in Jamaica, I'm very much aware of how much that does not really exist a lot in a lot of the companies in Jamaica. And it has always been that way. So if there's work going on in one area or a company in Jamaica, I'm happy to hear that. And it's kind of giving me like, hey, hopefully there's a way to kind of spread the word that psychological safety is a good thing. So thanks for that.
And Christina, I'm happy to connect you not only with our Agile champions in the Caribbean, but actually with people that have lived the experience in the Caribbean that maybe can help you as well. So very happy to do that. I must say that recently, what we did work with the cluster one, which is Bahamas, Curaçao, and so on, is that we tailor-made the sessions to adapt it to their context. So what we did is we asked them their suggestions and took their voices and built something tailor-made for them, because we're aware that it's very different to be 2 or 3 people in one island or in several islands than one team of 15 people like Fernando in Dominican Republic. So that's a different constellation. And that's where our diversity and inclusion has to come in and really be able to give different design, and fulfill different needs depending on the context. That's why seeing that integration with the context is so important.
No, that's brilliant. I'd love to connect with people. That's interesting, because I'll tell you one funny story. Before I moved to the UK, I actually worked in a company where you probably know Claro, the big Mexican company. They came to Jamaica, and the context was that they were going to compete with Digicel. And literally they came in, they had the entire strategy. There were so many documents in Spanish that weren't translated to English. My manager and I, we went to a conference, a strategy conference in Mexico, where pretty much predominantly all of the talks were in Spanish and none of us were fluent. And we were just like, oh, this is going great.
You can ask the question directly to them, and maybe some of them, or a couple,
okay.
Can take.
So do you want us to share the questions with you here now, or do you want to go into breakouts?
I think we're a small enough group where maybe we can just stay together.
Okay, so the first question we have for you, and please use the chat or say whatever you want, is what from everything you heard, because I'm assuming there's consultants, there's coaches, there's scrum masters here, there's leaders. So what was resonant to you? What are you taking away?
Pick the right fight.
Pick the right fight. Thank you.
Find a unicorn supporter at the top.
Find another Alvaro. Good one.
I'm really intrigued by the creating the connection between the leadership circle profile and the mindsets, so that they start to inform each other and provide some of the credibility that comes with a 360 versus just people having opinions.
Yes. Let me just show you another version of what I showed you that actually is mapped with the leadership circle to see if that helps. This one here. So you have the mindset, the skills, and the creative competency. It is mapped.
Nice.
Is that the one that you were looking for?
Yeah, that was definitely sort of like, it had to exist in the background. It was just like, okay, that just.
Exactly, that's the one. What else?
I mean, obviously for me, it's like seizing on the structures. You don't lead with the structures. The structures get created to support what is emerging. I think I'd love seeing design thinking in there. I would love to pick your brain even more to see how that plays a role into creating systemic sight, as Barry Oshry would call it, you know. But, you know, that's also another big can of worms.
Context is king, Rob. And Elena said iterative design of the program and adjustments made. Yes, exactly. What about the skills that you're noticing in your context? What are top skills that you are noticing this is important for our context?
Or for our personal context, is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mentioned mine. Design thinking is actually a superpower, right?
I think, well, for me, for the current context that I'm in, I've been basically just focused on kind of having that growth mindset, learning as much as I need to learn currently, and also being courageous and having the conversations that I need to have in terms of, one, being completely vulnerable in terms of, hey, these are the things that I need to succeed. And also, should I say, evaluating in terms of connecting with the right people and saying the right things at the right time.
Maybe I can ask there and to Christina, one of the learnings and one of the patterns that the data and the system was telling us that the courageous authenticity mindset, right? For that reason, we create, well, we structured the Dare to Lead community here in CAG. Actually, 16 people, we received that program in order to share that message of vulnerability and Dare to Lead, right? In order to increase courageous authenticity and so on and so on. So those are the learnings that the data can tell us, the voice of the system can tell us. Other examples, digital mindset, for example. In the last year, we found a gap for digital mindset. So we create an entire program to increase digital mindset in people, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Thank you, Rudy.
I think another one of my takeaways is that you actually have somebody who does statistics full time. That's pretty darn cool. Like having that kind of data orientation and having that to support this idea of leadership development and organizational development. That's really, really, I don't think I've ever heard of that before.
And his name is Rudy Starr. What a coincidence. What a coincidence is that, right?
For me, it's been an amazing journey. And we have 1 year, right?
We have 1 year of partnership.
And there's a lot to build. I have an entire pipeline of people analytics and ideas to develop. This is a fascinating journey.
Great.
One thing I didn't hear you talk about is regulatory concerns for, you talked about wanting your innovation to get into the hands of patients sooner. How do you work with the systems that you no doubt have that are kind of trying to get in the way of that by making sure that things are safe and that they're thoroughly, tested and examined, and yeah, just that behemoth of things that slow you down.
Interesting. Fer, do you have a take on that you're living it from the country perspective?
Sorry, I just got disconnected a few seconds.
So do we have any systems that are holding us back in this journey? So an example was regulatory or compliance or license to operate, for example, right?
Yeah.
If that's what you're referring to.
Yes.
So that's kind of our boundaries, right? Because we need to have license to operate, we need to, and so on. Mindset wise, I don't see much of that tension. But what I have seen is in the last year, people leaving because this is not anymore the place that, they feel comfortable, because there's a certain edge of uncomfortableness when you have to grow.
But I would add, Gaby, that in terms of regulatory, it's what we call ecosystem shaping. So we're trying to, what we're learning in terms of mindsets, not only to keep that for ourselves, but also how do we share this with stakeholders, with authorities, and so we're trying to shape the ecosystem, to really help patients. And so more than holding us back is how can we influence, how can we share our learnings with them, and that's something that we're trying to do.
I love that answer.
Yeah, working your larger network, suppliers and partners.
That is actually, it's funny that that's one of the things that they talked about in the Coaches Rising presentation, was that they wanted to influence like outside of the company.
Yeah. And I guess the last question we would have for all of you is, what would you do differently? If you were be in our shoes, what would you do differently?
Or what's missing from our presentation? What do you think it's missing?
I think it's more, it's hard to cover it all in 45 minutes, what you did in a couple of years, right, or more. And also the prior trials of where things have gone and learning from those mistakes of other people that came before. For me, kind of going back to Olaf's question of like governance and the business side of things, and there's always gotchas there, right? And I think it's sort of like, for me, I would have loved to hear more of like speaking on how to, what was sacrificed. So you just a moment ago, you were mentioning, hey, there were people that the culture didn't fit anymore. The culture changed on them, right? And just kind of like going back to my question was like, how to see how the culture evolved through it, because it wasn't A to B, right? It was like A to Y to X to W. You made many different shifts all along the way. And what was that journey like? It would have been fascinating to hear.
What shows up for me too is how much my coaching is going towards, doing less. There's so much pushing happening and so much goal setting that really overloads organizations to a point where it becomes counterproductive. But all we've learned ever is push harder. And so a little bit that question, certainly in Agile, where we're talking about sustainable pace and prioritization as a way of managing overwhelm, sort of the conversations around workload and goal setting and what's reasonable, what's our capacity, when are we trying too hard, what are the effects of overwork? Those things are not obvious. And there's a lot of really bad management habits around that.
And definitely a space that we ourselves are navigating. Right. Actually, you just mentioned the key topics at our face-to-face as an enabling team was to deeper, because if we would look at it from the surface, it seemed like a prioritization challenge, but then you go deeper and it wasn't about prioritization. It was about responsibility and accountability.
In people's places, right? Where they feel like their jobs are threatened or the way their old existence is threatened.
Yeah.
I think for me, in terms of, I would kind of like a little bit of, so I know in terms of the analytics, we had the kind of pie chart, and the growth mindset and challenger thinking was like the largest subset of that pie chart. But it would be interesting to kind of understand the dynamics of like the 6 mindset that you had up and like you presented to the leadership team. So is it the case that, you know, let's say from a person who's on the ground and they're just seeing this, they might be like looking like, ooh, I need to be growth mindset. I need to be the growth mindset and the challenger section, as opposed to, it's not really clear if the 5 mindsets are, you know, they're coexisting. And then the understanding is that once you kind of fall within these different mindsets, there is, should I say, work on understanding the kind of chemistry or the dynamics that happens between people within these different mindset groups. So that's the only question, because when I look on it, I kind of see it where it makes it easy for leadership to digest that we're saying these are the mindsets that we want across the company. But I don't really see anything further in terms of we have these different mindsets and it's all about them coexisting together, as opposed to everybody now thinking that I have to be a growth mindset, I have to be in the growth mindset, challenger, authentic and vulnerable as quickly as possible.
So more like a stack learning, Christina.
Yeah.
Well, and that's a main topic at the moment. How do we learn that all these skills build upon each other instead of our sequentially, you know, with each other? How they build upon each other. And I think another piece is when somebody identifies in their leadership circle profile, what is that one thing that I want to work on? What am I going to stop doing, start doing? It is later that it's mapped into the mindset, not the other way around, not saying I want this mindset and then I choose my behavior. It's the other way around. What do you as an individual need to work on? And then it's mapped into a mindset. And it's mapped because basically from global, as this whole effort at Roche right now globally, these are the mindsets that are globally being pursued globally. So what we're doing is trying to help people through the skills to live them. But yet I do understand this understanding of how do I build upon, and it's not separate, because if you have one challenge, you're going to be applying like 5 of these or 7 of these at once. And it's not that easy to identify and say, this is this, this is that. But actually you're doing it through habit.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
It's and I could say like, I think to kind of dovetail on what Christina said, like I would love to hear like a different spin on the same talk about how the role of professional coaching played a role. Because there's an aspect here, especially again around middle management, where a lot of we feel the frozen middle, the squeezed middle, right? Because the thing is, when you talk about like, oh, I gotta be these leadership types, it evokes a certain type of striving. Like I have to grasp and be this way, even if I don't genuinely feel like that. And it's gonna create a lot of existential crisis. Let's call it that. Right. And then it's really great that you have leadership coaches, you have professional coaches on hand to support that. Right. And again, that's another thing that is like very hard to measure, but still like anecdotally, qualitatively, that would be really interesting to hear that spin on the same journey.
Thank you. we'll take that into account.
And for me to build both on Volker's comment and then we comment, when I hear about such an interesting program like yours, Gaby, designed, my question always comes like, how much choice or agency do people have in it?
Or how much do they think they don't have?
No,
right?
but to me, it's my three fundamentals. When you go and work with the large system and you try to align them and you try to, the pillar, one pillar is value. Do we all understand what value is and how we deliver it? The other pillar is the relationships. We've got no one functions alone. So do we know how to build relationships? Are we skilled in them? Do we understand the necessity? But then the third pillar to me is, which comes to every performance and development and everything, is choice or the agency. How much say do I have in it, or I just have to jump through the hoops because it was designed by someone? If you want me to change my behavior so company can deliver value faster, better, and whatever cheaper, what are my choices? I think like every design can think about it and design for choices, not overwhelming. Not like a sandwich station where you don't know what to choose. But you can design for choices that creates more ownership, more buy-in, and more kind of like, yeah, I made this decision, I chose it. So that's what I would be interested in seeing.
Thank you, Elena. You just gave me something to ponder on, to think of, like what is the level of choice? And yeah, very valid comment. Thank you.
And from what I know about Roche or Genentech is, there is a culture of professional development and the expectation that you are continually improving. That's fairly unique. I don't know a lot of large organizations where that is so explicitly at the front.
Yeah, that's true. So
and a long tradition. I think I started working with Genentech in 2011. That was already front and center.
Yeah,
I agree.
I think it's a time for me to reach the poll and launch the poll to collect the feedback and give our speakers a little breather and a glass of water if they want to. So let's collect some feedback and then we'll just hang out in our networking lounge. Everyone? Yeah, I think so. Thank you very much. And share the results for everyone viewing. Thank you. And I guess I'll stop recording and we'll just move into informal part of our evening.